Revelation chapter 6. We're going to be looking at 2 verses today, 5 and 6. And again, this whole chapter is about when God gives humanity actually what it wants. So the first initial sealed judgments is God giving humanity what they've been desiring, what they've been wanting. And they've been wanting the Antichrist, so he's going to give it to them. And they've been wanting peace, but he's going to give them this false peace that turns into war. And now he's going to give them exactly the ramifications of the economic system that they want. And what that ends up giving them will be devastating. So the title of today's message is Economic Prosperity Built Upon Unrighteous Mammon Will Collapse. And the reason I used unrighteous mammon is that's the word Jesus used for wealth. And in his day, unrighteous mammon was the idol of materialism. It is the worship of creation in Romans 1. It leads itself into commercial Babylonianism. And just to define unrighteous mammon before I move on, unrighteous mammon means to gain wealth illicitly, illegitimately, unlawfully, illegally, somehow dishonestly gained, and illicitly, illegitimately, unlawfully, illegally, and dishonestly used. So, whether you get it or you use it, if it's used unlawfully according to God, it is unrighteous mammon, and that's the economic world of Satan, the god of this world. That's how the economic system works here in this age that we live in. It is not according to biblical economics that you're seeing right now going on in the world. It is the Babylonian system of commercialism. And so we're now in our current events, a world war economically. There are competing forces trying to prevent a free market system. And the reason I use the free market system, or I use capitalism, that's the words that's been demonized by the left and by the one-worlders, the globalist bankers. The reason they cannot stand the free market, they cannot stand capitalism, because the free market is based on biblical economic values, based on biblical economic principles. So that's why we're seeing a war with capitalism. That's why you see in this last video clip that 40% of these millennials or even Americans are now favoring some form of socialism or some hybrid, because they are simply have gotten away from the Bible and they don't understand biblical principles of economics. Now, we're in a topic of economics that sometimes bores a lot of people, but you have to understand this, because here's the point. Your view and practice of economics signals your spirituality. It is directly linked. So how we do our own personal budgets in our home, how we see economic systems, and how we run our businesses and how we run things is based on our spirituality. Because I can tell you this, on the flip side, on the evil side, false spirituality is directly tied to money. The whore of Babylon, which is commercial Babylon and religious Babylon, is tied together. So you have the religious aspect and the economic aspect that are actually tied together. So anywhere you see false religion, it'll always be directed to money. Every time. You can't get away from that. So even in the satanic world, there's a link there. And you'll see it through their economic policies, through their economic practices. So economics is a big deal, and how you manage it and how you view it. So right now, I want you to think about what's happening currently before we get into our text, just to set the stage and to understand where this is all going, because the passage in Revelation is showing you where this is all going, okay? Right now, the economic war against capitalism or free marketism, which derives from the Bible, they're wanting to get rid of it because they want to get rid of our Judeo-Christian background. What has made America so economically prosperous? It is the simple exercise of biblical principles in economics. That's it. That's how we got so prosperous. And the whole world envies the United States for that. Instead of saying, hey, how do you do that? How do you employ this biblical system? They don't. They don't employ this in Iran. They don't employ this in Saudi Arabia. They don't employ it in communist countries like China or Russia. And so they are envious of a free market system and what it does to prosper a culture. So what they would rather do is just steal from us and redistribute the wealth to themselves, which is a satanic system and comes from the whore of Babylon. We know it as communism, Marxism, progressivism, or whatnot. Notice in America what we have. Our founding fathers understood what the Bible taught Israel. When God created a nation, He created Israel. And so our founding fathers used that template to create the United States. And what did they end up coming up with? And looking at the Ten Commandments, what our founding fathers realized is that we had inalienable rights from God. That they were given to us by God, not from a government, not from a state. And they're inalienable, which meant that the Ten Commandments would be put in the negative. Have you noticed that the Ten Commandments are in the negative? Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not covet. Why are they in the negative? Because they are inalienable rights given to human beings that the only thing you can do is take something away from them because it's inherent in them. And so what our founding fathers did, and you guys understand this, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but really it was the pursuit of life, liberty, and property. Embedded in the Ten Commandments was the protection of private property, was the protection of the person itself, and then he had freedom given as long as he stayed within the moral framework of the Judeo-Christian ethics. And he would be fine. You would have the freedom as long as you functioned in that arena. And that's how our country was established. That's how Israel was established. It assumed that individual human beings had rights. But now what the war is, and where this is going, the war is this, that people in government and in the world system, the globalist system, are saying, no, that's wrong. That the state determines rights. And these are positive rights. So it's something they have to add to you. They give you them. And so what the state does is they postulate benefits, turn them into rights, and then give them to somebody. Now, in order to do this is why I want you to contrast positive rights versus the negative in the Ten Commandments. Something that can be taken away versus something that has to be given to a person. If that has to be given to a person economically, guess what? That state or nation or city has to take it from somewhere else because nations and states do not produce anything. So guess who they take it from to give the right to? They take it from taxing people. You have to have a third-party spender in order to take from this group to give a positive right to this group. So the new positive right, they want everyone to have the internet. They think that's a right. And so in order to give everyone internet access, I got to take from these people and then I got to give that to them. Or anything else for that matter. That's what the war we're in with entitlements. Do you understand? The United States currently has 100 trillion of unfunded liabilities. That's not the national debt. National debt's what 20 trillion? We have 100 trillion of unfunded liabilities, and we don't know how we're going to pay that. These are entitlement benefits to people that the federal government and the state or the city owes money to because they told them they would give them a benefit, which now has become a right. Ask yourself before we get into the book of Revelation, in the Ten Commandments, when God established Israel as a nation, a fledgling nation out of nothing, did He put in the commandments, you have the right to education, you have the right to health care, you have the right to work, you have the right to internet access? He didn't, right? Because those would be positive rights. You would have to take something from someone else to give that. He put inalienable rights in there. Thou shalt not take, thou shalt not steal. So what you start seeing now is the United States has gotten away from its Judeo-Christian ethics of inalienable rights and postulated positive rights. Every communist system, Marxist, socialistic system does this in the guise of emotional morality. Oh, you don't want somebody to have something. That's not fair. For instance, immigration seems to be a hotbed. No one can figure it out. And if you go against saying we shouldn't allow people from like Pakistan just to pack their bags and say, I'm going to become an American citizen because I have a right to become an American citizen, so I'm just going to go right over their border and unpack my bags and say, now you feed me. You take care of me. Let me get on your welfare system. Let me get on your unemployment system. And I'm not even a citizen. Does a person living in Pakistan have the right to become an American citizen? No, they do not. Now, it's one thing if they want to wait in line and go through the process, but no one has the rights to the benefits that our Constitution provides the American citizen. No one does until you become an American citizen. And then I say, well, that's racist. That's xenophobic. No, that's protecting the people you're taking care of now. Because if you keep saying anyone can become an American citizen, you have to take from me and hurt me in order to help them. And that's not biblical. You can't hurt yourself or hurt other people in helping other people. That doesn't work. The ends don't justify the means. And so this whole thing now with the immigration, well, people have a right. Well, that's fine. No one's against immigration. We're against illegal immigration. But again, at the same time, no one on this planet has a right to become an American citizen. That wasn't what our founding fathers thought about. But now, because of globalism, that has become a right. It's a right now. And so now you're seeing this postulation of rights. And so this has been a war. It's a war over private property. It's a war over your personal freedoms. And now you're seeing that so many people like this positive rights being given to them that Bernie Sanders becomes a legitimate contender to be our president. Holy smokes. Are you kidding me? Bernie Sanders? Yeah, think about this. Americans under 30 totally embraced the dude. Had no problem. This is a flat-out communist. The dude went in his honeymoon to Russia. Who goes to Russia for their honeymoon? To see the Kremlin? I mean, you got to be kidding me. You go to Tahiti, you go to Hawaii, you go to the Bahamas. You don't go to the Russian Kremlin. What kind of person is this? But yet the millennials love it because you know why? Free stuff. Free stuff. Hey, Bernie told me he's going to pay for my college, man. How are we going to pay for your college unless you overtax me? I got to pay for you to go to Harvard and spend $250,000 on your education? Now you go get a job and you make some money. I'm not paying for you. Education is not a right. Never has been. In all of biblical history, education was a privilege. That's the problem with our school systems, isn't it? The leftist mindset thinks that education is a right. And hence, our school systems are the worst in education. Now, we got good teachers in here, I know, but you know the scores of the kids. They can't read, they can't write, they don't have any sense of history. And yet we keep cranking them out and they keep going through graduation. No child left behind because every kid has a right to education. Kids cussing out teachers, they don't ever get kicked out of the schools. Why? Because they have a right. No. Education's a privilege. When you turn it from a privilege to a right, you get the school systems that you get now. A failure. They almost have to have a restart. They're so bad. Talk to any one of our teachers here. Talk to them. Ask them what they think is going on. They'll tell you. They're good teachers. They're doing the best they can, but they're in a system that's failing them and failing the kids because they think education is a right. It's not. It never has been. In the Ten Commandments, did it say anything about education? Nothing. And that was a creation of a nation. Where are you going with this, Brandon? Why are you talking about all this? Because the book of Revelation is going to show you 2 verses that show you where this all ends up economically. That's where I'm going with it. That's why I give this big introduction. You have to understand that what's in front of your very face with this economic war, this demonization of free market capitalism, and this love of communism, Marxism, progressivism, and all of it's going through this globalist movement is going to a place. It is prophetic. It's happening right in front of your very eyes. The economic system that the world government will employ is already here. It is on the march and moving very quickly. This last election put a stop to a little bit of this. With Trump, the globalists did not know what to do, and they still don't know what to do with him. He stopped it, but if Hillary Clinton got in there, she would have popped the clutch. She would have went for it, because she's a globalist. So this whole thing, that's why they're demonizing Trump. I mean, the guy's not perfect. We know. He says stupid things on Twitter and everything. But he is not a globalist. And they are really ticked about this economically. This is why he has so much vitriolic spewed at him, not only from the media, but from the globalists, and every political character from Europe and even here is opposing him. I feel sorry for the guy. I really do. I feel bad. He's got so much opposition. But it's going somewhere economically. And this is where the book of Revelation comes into play in this. This is the setting. God is giving now in the tribulation, into the future, in the sealed judgments, what humanity wants. You want it? I'll give it to you. And what you're going to get is this. You have been wanting unrighteous mammon, wealth, illicitly gained and then illicitly spent. You've wanted that, right? You want to redistribute the wealth, take from people so you can have positive rights and everybody's on a level plane. God is going to say, let me show you what that system that you guys have concocted ends up at. Because all you have to do right now, he's already showing you, look at Venezuela, look at Fidel Castro's country of Cuba, look at communist Russia, look at China, look at any communist country. When you see that micro level of Venezuela, where the dictator of Venezuela tells his people because they're starving to death, well, just go into the zoos and start eating the animals in the zoos if you don't have any food. Can't have toilet paper, can't have anything because of the economic system that they have employed. That same economic system is what the globalists want, and this is where it's going to take the world. And God's saying, break open the 3rd seal and let them have it. So let's look into this. The principle is this. Wealth gained in unrighteousness will collapse and lead to more economic destruction. That's the principle we're working with. We're going to see this principle here in the book of Revelation, then we'll apply this principle later on. Verse 5. When he had opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, come and see. So I looked, and behold, a black horse. The basis of a black horse comes from Lamentations 5:10. It is the signal of famine. There's a famine that hits the entire planet. Notice, their economic system leads them to famine, just like Venezuela, just like China, just like Russia, in bread lines, waiting for bread and things of that nature. God is saying, when you employ this kind of system, this is where it leads, famine. And it says this, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. The scales represent economy, power over the economy, commerce, trade. That's how you did trade in the Middle East, is with scales. You would buy stuff with your money, weigh it out with what you bought. So you're dealing with the economic system. Verse 6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. Let me come back to the oil and the wine, because that's a whole other thing I have to unpack. But let's just stay with what's happening here. A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts barley for a denarius. A denarius is a day's wage in that period of time, in John's time. It was a Roman wage. It would be equivalent to 15 cents. This was the common day wage. If you were a day laborer and you worked for somebody, that's the wage you got for that day. Now, what it's saying then, if you unpack this, that the denarius represents a common day's wage. Okay, so I want you to think about it in your own terms. How much do you make per day? Okay, you just do the math in your head. How much do you make per day in your job? Okay? You call it a day's wage. I know you get paid maybe every 2 weeks or whatnot, but if you do the math, what do you make per day? Okay? And it says a quart of wheat for a day's wage. A quart of wheat is right in the palm of your hand, about that much. A quart of wheat would get you one meal for one person. And then if you went to barley, which is a lesser nutrient grain, which they grew, it was a poor man's grain in that day. So if you didn't have a lot of money to buy refined wheat, you went and bought barley, and you could feed more, and he goes 3 quarts of barley. So you can basically feed 3 people with barley, a lesser grain. But yet, nonetheless, it takes you an entire day's wage to make one meal. And if you don't buy a lesser food, you can only have one meal, so you have to buy lesser, cheaper food, like barley, to get 3 meals out of a day's wage. Do you see the implications here? So this is a huge economic problem of why famine has hit the entire globe, and it is showing you that there's a major economic gap here between what people make and what they can do for food. Now, you guys, I know we complain right now about food prices, and they keep going skyrocketing, and they keep going up, and you're like, man, the cost of things is getting out of control. Trying to go eat out is very expensive, and you get that. And you're like, this is ridiculous. And everybody wants a tip. Have you noticed that? Everybody wants a tip. Now, I'm not against tipping. I love tipping. But when you get food to order out and you go pick it up, they still want a tip. And I'm like, what am I tipping you for? You bagged my food, I'm supposed to tip you? I'm not trying to be cheap, but when did we start tipping people for bagging food? Anywho, it's expensive to eat right now. And if there's a hiccup in the Middle East right now, an oil problem, our gas prices will go higher, and then our food prices will go higher, right? And you know that. Simple economics. Okay. But it's saying eventually this crisis gets so bad because of this famine that it takes you an entire day's wage to make one meal. This is why the most of the world will be starving to death. I want you to think about this. If this happened right now, as we currently speak, the rapture happened, this world goes into the tribulation, do you realize that 2/3 of our world is already in starving conditions? Yes, 2/3 of our world is already in starving conditions. 75% of this world operates on $2 a day. $2 a day. And yet in Western culture, America, Europe, and these different places, they are increasing their debt beyond sustainability. You know what the national debt is, but do you know that in the World Economic Forum estimates that the global economy needs right now $103 trillion right now to get it back into bailing itself out. And they don't know where to get it from. They're desperate. So we are having a current financial crisis and no one's talking about it. We have bubbles that are getting ready to burst and no one's talking about it. And every time this bubble bursts, it lends itself more into this one world, cashless, communistic system. Now, let's unpack this. There could be several reasons for this to occur, and I want to give you them. The first one is that this famine is caused by a drought caused by the 2 witnesses. Let me show you in the book of Revelation 11, 3 through 6. As we'll study later on, the 2 witnesses are on the scene by now in the tribulation. The 2 witnesses, we don't know who they are. Some guess that it's Moses and Enoch or Moses and Elijah. Some guess that it's just 2 Jewish prophets that are going to be new, but Moses-like and Elijah-like. Again, we'll go through that later on when we get to Revelation 11. But nonetheless, they're on the ground. And they're on the ground and causing certain supernatural things to occur on the earth. So this famine could be related to them. As you read, watch. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days. That's 3.5 years. The first 3.5 years of the tribulation. Clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees, that's Zechariah, a reference to, and the 2 lampstands standing before the God of the earth. And if anyone wants to harm them, fire precedes their mouth and devours their enemy. So these 2 witnesses have the supernatural ability to have fire come out of them. And if anyone wants to harm them, he must be killed in this manner. They're torched, basically. These have power to shut heaven so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy. And they have power over the waters to turn them to blood and to strike the earth with all plagues as often as they desire. So let's just leave that up there. Notice the ability of the 2 witnesses. They can shut off the rain on any place on the planet. And they can turn water into blood, as Moses did. So this is a reference to Moses and Elijah's type of miracle. So Elijah shut off the rain for 3.5 years, and then Moses turned the water into blood. Notice what they hit. They hit the water, the hydrologic system of the planet. So if that's the case, then this is in concert with this sealed judgment, that once the sealed judgment has been let loose, the 2 witnesses are the ones who actually did the plague and caused a drought. It's a supernatural thing, and we don't have to go into that, but they stop the hydrologic system, and they turn the waters into blood, and so that would definitely lead to a drought over the planet. And so if you had crops in the fields, they're going to dry up, and you're going to have inevitably a famine. The second cause could be this, is just simply the result of the first and second seals. The first seal is the release of the Antichrist, and the second seal is the release of war over the planet. So everything just crumbles into a world war. You have our first world war. That makes sense. If you had a world war, wars devastate countries and destroy crops, and obviously famine lends into that. And you saw that in World War I, you saw that in World War II, or any war always leaves behind a famine. And the third reason could be the angel that's doing this specific seal prophecy, that it's him that's causing the economic problems. But here's a note for us. Regardless of how the source is, whether it's the 2 witnesses, the angel who actually does this, causes a famine, or it's the result of the first 2 seals, regardless of that, do you know what message God is sending to the world? I gave you this economic system that you so want, this communistic system there. You redistribute the wealth, and the elite at the top has everything, and everyone is destitute under you, just like in Venezuela. So I gave it to you. Now on a global scale, you thought you had this airtight. You thought you figured it out from a humanistic level. Aha! I will simply break your system by causing a famine. God is showing the world, you see how easy your system is to break. Your humanistic economic system that is atheistic, devoid of me, devoid of my principles, I can eliminate it just like that by causing a drought. And you're on your heads. That's how simple it was. And I think God's trying to show them that. But how about this term, though, and do not harm the oil and the wine? We don't want to leave that out. Well, there's several options here. What's going on here? Some people theorize, and there's a couple, or several, I should say, theories out there, and they're all legitimate. Do not harm the oil and the wine. One is that there's just simply no money left over. That if you're working all day in the tribulation period to make money, and all you have is to buy one meal, you have no money left over to buy the other staples of oil and wine. In that culture, oil and wine were staples in the sense that you cooked with your oil, your olive oil, you lit your houses with olive oil, and wine was used sometimes many times as a purification of water. They would mix in wine, and the alcohol in the wine would purify the drinking water. It went without question. You always mixed water with wine because the wine would purify it. And so those were staples. A lot of people have conjectured that that's all they can do is buy the necessities of life, but they can't go past that. But here's the deal. You and I know if I just have enough money for food, then how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to pay my electric? How am I going to pay my gas? How am I going to pay gas for my car to get to my job if all my money is going to food? Do you see the economic snowball? It doesn't matter. Eventually, if it's a staple and you can't get it and you can't buy gas for your car, you can't work, you won't be able to buy food. You'll go on your head. So some people have conjectured that. The other conjecture is that these are luxury items and that the luxury items are available to the elite during that time, just as they are today. Notice how that when people go into politics today, they don't get poorer, they actually get richer. A congressman goes into Congress and he comes out a multimillionaire. How does that happen? But they do, right? And so what happens is the system is geared for that. And the economics of this world is geared for the elite at the top and everyone else underneath them is poor. So what some interpreters have said that this possibly could be that the elite still have access to the luxury items, like the escargot and the luxury items of the world, whereas everyone else on this planet is struggling to stay alive and because they're facing starvation. That's Venezuela. That's Cuba. That's all these other little countries. And that's a good interpretation, I think, too. And the other interpretation is that this is an act of grace and mercy. Well, what do you mean? Well, this also bodes well in the interpretation. The phrase, do not harm the oil and the wine, is a phrase from the ancient Mediterranean warfare culture. What do you mean by that? Well, when the ancients fought against each other in the Mediterranean, they had no problems going in there, burning their fields, burning wheat, burning barley, and destroying that year's crop just to have an economic hit on that country they invaded. But the soldiers and the generals were always told, do not harm the oil and the wine. What that meant was, do not take down the olive trees and do not hit the vineyards. Leave the vineyards and leave the trees alone, because if we take it over, we're going to eventually need that source of an economic resource for our own takeover. So we don't want to do a scorched earth policy here. We want to leave an economy intact if we take over, which would be an act of grace and mercy. And so some people see this as God leaving certain things in place as an act of mercy. Some interpret this as medicine. Oil and wine were used as medicine, so that could be available, or just simply there are still food sources on the planet for people to survive as an act of grace and mercy with God. Yeah, that fits too. That fits too. So whatever you decide to take, what view you want to take, those three tend to be the best options of what it means not to harm the oil and the wine. Okay, but then here's the point. What's the purpose of this? What's God doing with this? It's a theological issue. You know He's given them what they want, but this goes back to Genesis chapter 11. This goes back to an ancient incident. It's one of the major incidents that happened in the Old Testament, and it's recorded in Genesis, and it's the Tower of Babel. He is now allowing what those humans that wanted to build a tower unto the heavens and not scatter over the planet, but group up together under a one world leader by the name of Nimrod, who was Antichrist-esque. He was a typology for the Antichrist. They had their own one world religion. They had their own one world government under Nimrod, and they refused to scatter, and they made emotional appeals not to scatter. And so you remember, God was not prepared for that, and it wasn't the timing, right? And so what did God do? He confused the languages, and they had to scatter and be forced to it. So God put the stop to it at that point in time. He wasn't ready for that at that point. But Satan has been working towards that ever since. He's been trying to build that up. And now, God is permitting it. So this is very ancient. It goes back to Babylon. And so let me show you another passage that lends itself to this passage, and it's found in Zechariah chapter 5. And there's a lot of hidden meanings in this, and we'll unpack it, but I want you to see the bigger picture that's going on. He's allowing commercial Babylon and spiritual Babylon to now come to the forefront and be seen. This is in Zechariah chapter 5 through 11. And it says, "Then the angel who talked with me came out and said to me, 'Lift your eyes now and see what this is that goes forth.'" So this is a prophecy about the future. "So I asked, 'What is it?' And he said, 'It is a basket that is going forth.'" So I think we have a picture of that. So they basically see an ephah. This is a basket. And this would be like a bushel. You hold wheat in there. It's for trade and commerce. But it represents economic Babylon or commercial Babylon. Okay? So let's go back to the text. "He also said, 'This is there are unregenerate humanity desiring this,'" okay? "This is their resemblance throughout the earth. This is the godless system that they've been wanting. This is them. This is what the humanity's been wanting, and now I'm going to give it to them." Verse 7. "Here is a lead disc." The idea of the lead disc has to do with a talent or a weight that you would use on scales. So it's an economic transaction, an economic system. And it says, "Lift it up," and this is a woman sitting inside the basket. Then he said, "This is wickedness." So you have a picture now of a woman inside the commercial system. Okay, the ephah represents the commercial system that all of humanity has been wanting, but yet there's a woman inside. And then it identifies the woman as wickedness. She is the same woman as you will find in Revelation chapter 17, called specifically the whore of Babylon. She represents religious Babylon. The outside that she's in is commercial Babylon. Notice how the two are together. Like I told you at the beginning of the sermon, every time you see false religion, Babylonianism, you will always see commercialism or the economic system of Babylon, which, you just take the names away, it's communism, Marxism, socialism, progressivism, anything against the free market system of the Bible. They're always together. So, I think we have another picture. She eventually rides the beast. The beast is the one world government that's getting ready to form right in front of our very eyes, and eventually will be under the control of the Antichrist. But until the Antichrist gets there, she rides the beast, which means there's a political, economic, and spiritual connection with Babylon under our one world system. They're all going to come together and coalesce. This is why we're seeing, not only from a political level, but an economic and spiritual level, a pushback of Judeo-Christian ethics, because they're forming. She's not riding it yet, but eventually the whore will eventually ride. This is interesting. This image of a woman riding the beast, you can be found in Europe today. Look at this picture. It's a woman riding a beast. Look at their coinage. This is on the euro. It's a woman riding a beast. Now, they're going to say this is Europa and this is a Greek mythology, but isn't it interesting? They're using images that John used in the book of Revelation to describe the union between the global government and the global religion and the global economic system. They're starting to use it. You're using the phrases peace and safety. They're starting to use phrases from the Bible. Isn't that amazing? And yet that's where this is all going. And so, continue on to the text. I want you to see this. "And they thrust her down into the basket, and they threw a lead cover over its mouth. Then I raised my eyes and looked, and there were two women coming with the wind in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the basket between heaven and earth." So you have this picture of now it's being transported to some location by these demonic creatures. This is extremely important. You have to understand why God's allowing this. Continue in the text, verse 10. "So I said to the angel who talked with me, 'Where are they carrying the basket?' And he said to me, 'To build a house for it in the land of Shinar. When it is ready, the basket will be set there on its base. Where is Shinar? Oh, that's right. Babylon. Shinar was the area of Mesopotamia where Nimrod built the Tower of Babel. That's where Babylon was built, right there in Shinar. God is telling us right there, and you can see this on the map. This is Babylon. Babylon today is about 60 kilometers south of Baghdad in Iraq. There's a satellite picture. So you have the Tigris and the Euphrates coming down the Fertile Crescent, and right there is where Zechariah is prophesying this whore and this commercial system will be centered. Yes, you got it right. The headquarters of the global system will eventually move its way to the Middle East and be situated in Iraq, where Babylon first began. The religious system and the commercial system is all going there. It's not going to be centered in New York. It's not going to be centered in London or in Europe or in Belgium or whatever. It's all going back to the Middle East. And it makes perfect sense, not only from a political standpoint, but from an economic standpoint. Guess where they're located? On oceans of oil. Oceans of it. Whoever controls the Middle East controls the entire planet. That's why Russia wants control of the Middle East. That's why they're putting their nose in there all the time, and Putin wants control of that. That's why it's a hotbed right now. Everyone's wanting control of this area because you control the world's oil. We get 60% of our oil from this area. So if you control this area, you control the whole entire planet. So the economic system that you see building right in front of you is going there. Why? Why would God allow that to go back to where it started? Simple. When God lets sin run, He lets it run its course. And He lets it go, and use our phrase, it runs full circle before He judges it. So when God is ready to judge someone or something or a country or a nation or a planet or whatever, He lets the sin run full course, full circle, and then it ends up back where it starts, and then He destroys it. He destroys it where it starts. It is important to destroy it where it starts, because where it all began is what caused all the problems. So He has to go to the headwaters, and He causes the destruction to happen there. That's why you're going to watch, and this may happen in front of our very eyes, a move to the Middle East to headquarter all this financial junk that you're seeing and locate it right there in Iraq. If God is true to His word, and I believe He is, and it's literal, that's where it's going, folks. So there's a bigger issue going on, and so this economic system causes a meltdown, and so follow me here. God disrupts it by a drought, and so their whole system collapses. The sinners there in Babylon, the religious sinners in Babylon, but it starts collapsing because a drought just caused it to collapse. Enter in a strong man. See, like I said, He's going to give them their desire for unrighteous mammon. You want it? You got it. But it's going to destroy you, and it's going to destroy you in a way you never thought it would destroy you. So yeah, I destroyed it with the famine, but you got something coming worse. Now you will cry out for an economic strong man, a political strong man, a religious strong man. And he's already been allowed by me. He's been coming up through the 10-league confederation. And yes, then you will beg for the Antichrist to fix your economic problems. And you know what the solution is to this? Revelation 13. And He will not let anyone buy or sell except those who have the mark of Him. That's His solution to the world economically. I'll solve your problems. Simple. We'll just track everybody. There'll be nobody loose. There'll be a cashless system. And we'll be able to mark down where people go, where they transact. There won't be any more starvation because we'll have it all under control. Just follow me straight to hell. This whole paradigm that God lets it collapse ends up causing them to eventually accept the Antichrist's economic solution. And guys, you saw it on the video earlier. Did you see that a newspaper even reported that more and more people are wanting to accept this little microchip in their right hand? Oh, I think I read that somewhere. I think that's in the Bible. Yeah, and now we have the technology to track. Now, it's in the infantile stage. I get that, and it's not the mark of the beast yet. But what you're seeing in front of your very eyes is what was foretold by John 2,000 years. Hey, man, they're going to be able to mark people and track their economic transactions. They're already doing it on your little smart cards. They're already doing it with your phones. Eventually, it'll be on your skin, so you can't have any identity theft. So everybody gets their fair share of food. And the Antichrist will say, see, I solved your problems. I'm your Messiah. I'm your hero. It sets them up for the Antichrist later on. Wow. What's some application with this? This is kind of difficult. Difficult text if you're dealing with economics. The first off is, you got to have your economics straight, okay? You have to understand, what does the Bible support? The Bible supports a free market system. You're like, Brandon, perfect, got it down. Then please go and tell your kids and your grandkids that we do not accept socialism, communism, Marxism, progressivism, or any form of hybrid of economic systems, because economics has to come from the Bible. I remember Obama telling people, well, we got to spend money to get out of debt. Did any economic person say, hey, man, that's crazy. We got to spend our way out of debt? Who does that in their own home? We're in debt. Let's just keep spending. I mean, they're not even rational. They're not even in reality. And I know that comes from economic systems that are just messed up. But here's the deal. Most economic systems are based on the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment based economics on atheism. That's why all your economic systems typically do not consider God into the equation. They don't consider biblical morality into it. And so all these hybrids that have popped out from the Enlightenment economic systems, they don't work. They simply don't work. But these people say, well, we just don't have the right conditions, and if we did it in the right conditions, we know it would work. Now, why don't you bow a knee to Jesus and say he knows what he's talking about? Why don't you do that instead of rebelling against him? Because your economic system is going to collapse. Okay, please tell the millennials that Bernie Sanders is not a viable option. But here's the deal. The reason I say that, you think, oh, that's crazy. Yeah, that's us. You go outside of our church. You talk to other Christians. Dude, they're not even on the planet economically. They don't have a problem with free stuff. They don't have a problem with entitlement programs. They don't have a problem that the majority of our budget, federally and state-wise, are entitlement programs. So we would rather pay, we think this is moral, to pay for a lady to keep having babies with no husbands. And she has 3, 4, 5 guys who are the fathers, but she keeps having a string of kids, and she's up to 8 kids now. She's shelled out, and she doesn't know who the fathers are, and yet we pay for her. So she drives into Walmart with a Cadillac Escalade with spinners on the wheel, and she has her cell phone, and she has a Gucci bag. You tell me how that's moral. I see it all the time. We're upside down. Ask yourself this. Why is socialism appealing to the younger kids? Why? Because it's simple. Entitlement. We have an entitlement culture now. And we tell people coming into our country, you can be entitled to. We'll give you a bunch of free stuff. You want to go to use our schools, don't pay any taxes, go ahead. We'll feed you 3 meals a day at the schools, and you're not even a citizen. So it's an entitlement culture has been presented to the American public. And so we have an entire generation of millennials, which is the largest generation in American history, 80 million of them, getting ready to come up into the work world and start having political offices, who have an entitlement mentality. Now, how did this entitlement mentality come from? And this is where we want to do the application. It's extremely important just to understand this. It came from being raised by Generation X. That's my generation. the latchkey kids, the nomads, the wanderers, the raise yourself on your own type of thing. What do you mean? I've shared this with my Sunday school class, my young adults, so they can understand it, because they're parenting kids right now. So but I don't know if I've shared this with the church. There's been research done on how this happened. How did we get with the millennials who want to be communists and like a bunch of free stuff and are lazy and typically don't want to work, but think they should be given a lot of stuff even though they don't work? Where did that come from? Walk with me back in history, just a little bit. World War II generation. And again, if I hit your generation, don't take it personal. This has just been a general survey of what's happened in American history. World War II generation goes through the Great Depression, sacrificed a lot, gave all they had, and then they come back from the war, and there's an economic boom in American history because most of the economics in Europe were destroyed. And so we had all the factories going on, we had an economic boom here, and things were great here in America, a la the boomers. The boomers were born in economic prosperity. And then this is what's been said. The boomers, looking back to their parents, couldn't outdo their parents in honor because they had fought in World War II, they had sacrificed through the Great Depression, they made it through, and they had a lot of honor. They might not have had a lot of finances, but they had a lot of honor. They sacrificed. They couldn't do that necessarily. So what they did to outdo their parents was, well, we'll just make more money than you. Hence, women entered the workforce in the 60s. You had a double income. And then the economic level of the boomers went skyrocket compared to their parents because you had two incomes going on. Again, don't take it personal. It's just a general, people have studied this, okay? So the boomers are up here economically, but it requires two workers. The mom and the dad are both working. And so the households, they have the material wealth that they need. They got it. They're having way more than mom. Bigger homes, luxurious vacations, all that other stuff. They're doing well. Okay, mom and dad are proud. But both have to work. Hence, my generation comes in. We're born into that. Hence, the term for Generation X is latchkey. Because that generation came home and no one was there. They opened the door, they fed themselves, they actually were little adults raising themselves, and the parents left them to wander through the streets and come home when it gets dark. That type of mentality. Okay. Then that generation, my generation, raises the millennials. And here's the mistake. My generation parents out of guilt. What do you mean? I'll be the first one to say it. When you're raised in an environment where there's no parents at home, what's the tendency for that person to do? You swing the pendulum over here. I'll be the most involved parent as I possibly could be. I'm going to be at everything my kids are involved in, even during school. And hence, the term comes with the Generation X parents, helicopter parent. The kid can't leave the parent's sight. The kid can't have any hurts, any discomfort, anything bad happen in their life, because I'm not going to let happen in my kid's life what happened in my life. I was hurt, I was abandoned, I was left alone, and I will never do that to my kids. And so they overdo it, and then you have the helicopter parent. Just everything. It is just all about the kid. It's the cult of the child. The child runs the home in the Generation X home. Again, don't take it personal. It's in general. This is going on all through America. What kind of child do you think you get when a child grows up in an environment where he never feels any pain, no discomfort, he's the king or the princess in the home, and he's told all day long, you're so special, you're so great, you can do anything you want, and the kid hasn't done anything, right? You could be an astronaut. You could be in the NBA. You could be in the NFL. And you can be a Major League Baseball player. You could be Beethoven or whoever. You can do it because you just set your sights and you just try really, really hard. And then they go to Rusty's Pizza Parlor after their soccer tournament and they come in last and they get a trophy and an MVP for coming in last. And everybody's an MVP because we don't want to hurt anybody's fragile self-esteem. So everybody's an MVP. And even though you came in last, everyone's getting a trophy. And then you go to the school systems, and they're telling them, oh, you got to build up the kid's self-esteem. He's just so down on himself and so down. So we need to tell him to have a win. What's your win today? Well, my win is I came to school, teacher. Oh, great, we're going to have a party for you. You came to school. And then they graduate. And they say, where's my job? Where's my job? I should have a six-figure job. They told me that. At least the government told me that. Where's my job? And they're living at home in a basement with mom and dad. Where's my stuff? Hence, they created the largest entitlement group we have ever seen in American history. Ever. There's never been a more entitled group than the millennials. I'm sorry. It just is what it is. I hope your kids or my kids are the exceptions to the rules. But growing up in a trophy environment for coming in last every week and being told that you're great and you're amazing. For what? They were just told they're amazing. They come out narcissists. They come out entitled, and they have no social skills, they have no job skills, and they can't do anything. They're useless as a bump on a pickle. Sorry. Now let's go prophetic. If we are close, and I believe we are, this generation, not only in America, but all in Europe, because all of Europe's like this, by the way. I just told you about America. Europe got there 50 years before we did. If this is the last generation before it all goes down, the Antichrist will have a cakewalk with these people. A cakewalk. When you have a bunch of wounded narcissists walking around having an entitlement mentality, they will play right into the economic system of the Antichrist and of the globalists, because the globalists will just tantalize them and say, we'll give you free health care. We'll give you free this, a free Obama phone. We'll give you this. We'll pay for your education. And they'll say, sign me up. You're telling me exactly what my parents told me. I'm wonderful, and I should have free stuff. You got it. You got it. The Antichrist will completely capitalize on this snowflake mentality. Now that we get closer to the end, this is not going to take a major deception. I thought the Antichrist was going to have to ramp things up. This is kindergarten stuff. He will be able to fool them just by giving them stuff. It's over. Unless they realize that there's only 4% of these millennials that serve Christ. Unless they come to faith in Christ and get saved and get on the right path, will they escape this. Because I can tell you this, if they don't, the school systems are not helping them. The colleges are not helping them. Our politics are not helping them. There's no one left to help them. If we don't help them, no one will. If we don't stand up against what's happening economically, no one will, because everybody's in line with this. I know this has been hard because it's dealing with economics, but you have to go there sometimes. Make sure we got our ducks in a row economically, okay?